It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. How are you? I thought today we would do a reset. This is episode 40 of The Log. So I thought we'd do a little reset. Just kind of hit the main topics that we're concerned with here at the show, give a little update on them, and so we'll do a show reset. And if you're a regular listener to the show, you know we have a couple of pet topics that we keep returning to, namely the climate emergency. So let's do a little update on that today, climate emergency. Wealth inequality, social justice, economic justice, and the role of money and corporations in all of that. And then, of course, and we don't talk about it all the time because I just get so sick of it. Everybody's talking about Agent Orange every day, all day, and it gets, the fatigue sets in. But we do have a responsibility to not turn our backs on it. It's not just a big joke. It's extremely important. So then the third main topic of the show that I want to kind of reset today is how we get rid of this guy, whether through election or through impeachment. Either way, it's got to happen for the sake of the world. Good Lord. So climate emergency, Agent Orange, and social and economic injustice. Those are the three. One last thought here before we dig in. I like to think of problems and solutions in terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term. I'm not a pie-in-the-sky guy who just gets all caught up in long-term solutions, how the world ought to be. I am a utopian. I definitely use that as a tool. But I don't think we can just open our eyes tomorrow morning and live in a utopia. It's important to have those long-term goals, those long-term solutions. Now then, you might say, well, you're an incrementalist then. I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I'm pretty impatient. I think our short-term goals and our long-term goals should be a little more closely related. I think there should be a tighter window. So as we discuss these things today, let me keep that in mind as well. For now, I'll just say that any short-term goal or solution you have, it really must serve the medium term and the long term. If a short-term action that you take is at odds with your medium or long-term goals, well, then you've got to discard that action. Each step along the way has to serve the next step. So here's a perfect example. We didn't get the nominee we wanted in 2016, so we didn't vote. Now, I understand. Hillary Clinton was, she's like the liberal villain in an Ayn Rand novel. I know that she's incredibly flawed, but are you going to sit here today and tell me that wasn't a better vote than Donald Trump? Come on. I'm the biggest idealist, I'm the biggest utopiast in the world, but you can't tell me that. You can't tell me the world wouldn't be a different place today. We'd have a different set of problems, but it would not be what we're facing right now. It makes a difference. So there's an example. Your short-term action is, well, I won't vote, and you see the result. So that's a short-term action that was at odds with your medium and long-range goals. The example when it comes to climate change, well, I'm just one person. I can have my lifestyle. I can be a consumer. I'm just one person. It doesn't make a difference. There's another example. Short-term action of consumption, which only serves to prolong the power of the corporations selling you your consumer goods and keeping you in a mindset that allows you to believe you can have that consumer lifestyle in a world that's both clean and fair. Well, you can't. It's a mathematical impossibility. You can't do it. Speaking of personal lifestyle and consumption, every time you partake in that, a short-term action of getting some comfort or convenience, it just further solidifies the power of the sellers, the power of the billionaires, the power of the 1%, the power of the people who control what's bought and sold. So long-term, perfect world, money doesn't even exist. If it does, it's distributed so evenly it becomes basically meaningless. So that's the perfect world. Can we have it tomorrow? If we all decided at the same time, yeah, we could. But again, I understand. I have a little bit of a realist in me. But I also understand that your short-term action cannot be at odds with your long-term goals. Climate change, getting rid of Agent Orange, and money, 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 money. We're doing a little reset today. Let's start with Agent Orange. This guy's got to go. It's not your run-of-the-mill, oh, we don't like this guy. Republicans don't like Democrats. Democrats don't like Republicans. No. We've gone way, way beyond that. Democracy itself, the whole notion of self-governance is really in peril. There's no getting around it. This world is going through some troubles when we're talking about basic notions of love and hate and fascism and freedom. I mean, come on. Now, I want to say this. I'm not going to ask you to just compromise. Sure, compromise is still something that should happen when it's appropriate, but there's no compromise between love and hate. There's no compromise between fascism and democracy. So when people ask you to try to get along with people, yeah, of course we want to get along with people, but this is a fight, you guys. This is a fight. There's no compromise. And the lies we are hearing on a daily basis, dozens and dozens every day if you're consuming any kind of news. Here's one of the lies we keep hearing from the Republicans. Oh, the Democrats are do-nothing Democrats. They're do-nothing Democrats. Well, that is just an outright lie. Over 400 bills have been passed by the House of Representatives. Over 400 pieces of legislation, including gun control, minimum wage, lowering prescription drug costs, climate change, you name it, they're doing their job. The current Democratic House has been one of the most productive in history as far as passing legislation. Good legislation. It's Mitch McConnell who's not doing anything. They're all quite literally sitting on his desk, all of these bills. Refuses to take them up, refuses to even debate them, like he refused to allow a Supreme Court nomination from a sitting president of the United States. How Mitch McConnell is still there, I don't know. If there was any justice in this world, he'd be back sitting on a rock in his little turtle farm. But let's talk about the impeachment just for a second. You're getting all the news you need, at least I hope you are. It's such an open and shut case. I don't need to convince you of anything. He's committing crimes right on camera. He asks us to read the transcript of the call between him and Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. And there it is, right in the transcript. Even the doctored transcript that they gave us. It was like the summary that Attorney General Bill Barr gave us on the Mueller report. This little so-called transcript of the phone call they gave us. And even in that, the crime is evident. What's being disclosed in the actual transcript and in the testimony before congressional committees is just more and more confirmation of the President of the United States using his power as president to shake down foreign countries, and Ukraine is only one of several, for his own personal political gain, to create and disseminate damning lies about his domestic political rivals. Now, when it comes to articles of impeachment, their toughest job is to decide which items to include, because there are dozens, hundreds. You could impeach this guy 100 times over. Now, they don't want to go back to the Mueller report, and they won't, but they could if they wanted to. There's plenty in the Mueller report. Mueller was begging Congress to impeach this president. It was barely between the lines. It was right there. Listen, guys, I can't do this. It's not my job. It's not my role. It's your job. It's your role to impeach this guy. Here's everything I found. Now go do it. And they were too chicken to do it. So impeachment really has to go forward, and now it is. I don't have to call for it anymore. We're there. It's going to happen. And Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans are once again take a big old dump on the Constitution, ignore their duty, adhere only to their deepest mission, and that is to maintain power. And every breath they take and every move they make is in service to their constituents of bigots and money hoarders. So the impeachment is going to happen. There's no turning back now. Now, the two ways it can go down, and the one, I admit, looks almost certain, that they will draw up the articles of impeachment, they'll have the trial in the Senate, presiding will be Chief Justice John Roberts of the Supreme Court, and the Republicans in the Senate will, in lockstep, vote to acquit. They've already announced they're going to. I had a friend point out the other day, you can't be on a jury if you state ahead of time to the judge before the trial even begins. Nope, I'm going to vote to acquit, no matter what. Well, that's what Mitch McConnell and the Republicans have done. They are the jury, after all. You understand how this works, right? Agent Orange is the defendant. The people who bring the articles of impeachment are the prosecution. And the members of the United States Senate are the jury. They are the jury. Quite literally, it's not a metaphor, it's what they are. And they've already said, nope, we've made our decision. Now, I said there are one of two ways it could go down. The second way, and more unlikely, but still possible, that now that these congressional hearings, as leading up to the articles of impeachment, we still have more hearings, we still have more testimony from witnesses. Now that that's going to be public for the world to see, it could sway. Again, I think this is unlikely, but it's a possibility I wish might happen. Hearing this public testimony and seeing the trial on live television, maybe enough American people tell the pollsters, nope, this guy's got to go. So even red states and swing states say, oh, okay, well, we've seen enough. We're convinced this guy has got to go. And if the tide turns and their support of Agent Orange means their defeat at the ballot box, well then, they switch their vote. Is it likely? No. Is it possible? Yes. Yes, it is. I believe it is. Not likely, but it's possible. But the bottom line is we got to get rid of this guy. If it doesn't happen through impeachment, well, then we got a little election coming up. And as we're resetting the issues of our day today, this whole fight between the progressive versus the moderate Democrats, come on. Can we all be clear that the so-called progressives are simply a return to what the Democratic Party was for decades? It's a return to FDR. Do you think FDR was a radical? Franklin Delano Roosevelt defined the Democratic Party for decades. The 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And then the Reagan Revolution had so much success that Democrats changed their stripes. They lost. And then we've got Bill Clinton. Welfare as we know it is over. You know, crap like that. Barack Obama is no liberal. I mean, for God's sakes, Richard Nixon proposed a negative income tax. Richard Nixon was working on universal health care. This is what the political spectrum used to look like. So we have an election. And for those of you with a dog in the fight, if you don't go progressive, if you continue on this deadly path of moderates, it just continues our spiral down that began with the 1980 election of Ronald Reagan on all the issues we care about, and especially for today's purposes, wealth and income inequality and the climate emergency. So let's talk a little bit about this election. Well, first we've got to get a nominee to go up against Agent Orange. And we don't know who that is yet. Could very well be Elizabeth Warren. I think there's a small chance that it's Bernie because of what he faces, because he's not just up against his fellow candidates. He's up against the Democratic establishment. He's up against the media. The media doesn't want him. Corporations don't want him. Nobody wants him, except the majority of people, the majority of voters. There was a poll taken recently where every issue right on down the line, people agreed with Bernie on the issues. They were asked on individual issues, and it went from, healthcare, jobs, war and peace, every issue you can think of, whatever. Bernie won, sometimes by double digits, over all the other candidates on every single issue. He was far and away the winner in this poll. But then you see other polls that put Bernie, and these are the ones you're more familiar with, that put him in, third or fourth place nationally. He's in a statistical tie with Elizabeth Warren in Iowa currently. He's leading in Nevada. He's leading in New Hampshire. So the early primaries look good. He could get something going here. But still, in the national polls, he's not on top. Joe Biden is still on top. So that means that there are millions of voters who agree with Bernie on every issue, but will not vote for him. Now, why is that? He's too old? That can't be it. Joe is pretty much the same age. I think he's a year, less than a year difference between Joe and Bernie. So it's not age. Is it the recent heart attack? It better not be, because that's just stupid. Get some education on that. That is not a problem. People who suffer heart attacks go on to live long lives. There's nothing wrong with Bernie's health. I've heard this from multiple people saying that they're tired of Bernie. What? Just because he's consistent. He's been, we saw him through the whole election cycle of 2016. We saw him debating Hillary. We heard all of his ideas. We saw the way he points funny with his finger and he yells and he talks like this and everybody's tired of hearing him. That is the most ridiculous, juvenile reason I can imagine. He's been consistent since the early 60s when he was out protesting violence and discrimination and protesting the war. So you're tired of him? You're bored with him? You want something a little more novel? This is not a show, you guys. This is not a TV show. This is not for your entertainment. Come on. You agree with him on the issues, but there's something about him. You're tired. You don't want to hear his grumpy grandpa voice anymore. Or the other reason, and I think it quite likely, is you don't believe he can win. And again, if you don't believe he can win, you're just simply wrong. Sometimes people are wrong. And the idea that he cannot beat Trump is just wrong. Again, just look at the numbers. Those who think this way, I love Bernie on the issues, but I don't think he can win. You are being manipulated. You are being manipulated by the national media. Turn off the damn television. I'm telling you. I watch some of it, but only as a public service to you. All right? I'm a professional. Don't attempt this in your own home. All right? I watch the Sunday shows, for example. I highly recommend that you do not attempt this on your own unless you are a professional. I'm going to tell you what I saw on CBS Face the Nation this past Sunday. They showed the graphic right there for the world to see. The latest Iowa poll, it had Warren at 22%, Bernie Sanders at 19%, Pete Buttigieg at 18%, and Joe Biden at 17%. They put it right up on the screen, big as day. And the moderator, with that graphic over her right shoulder, looks at the reporter right in the eye and says, "So, does it look like now it's a two-person race between Warren and Buttigieg?" And they talked and they analyzed and they did their punditry for about 5-6 minutes on the Democratic race. And not one single time was Bernie Sanders' name mentioned. That is one of dozens and dozens of anecdotes you can find in the media today. They do not want Bernie. He is being shunned. He's being ignored. He's being disappeared. I mean, he's getting royally screwed. But now, having said that, at this stage of the process, if he's not your candidate, if you have another candidate, that's fine. I understand. This is how it works. You have candidates you prefer and you might even be volunteering for. That's fine. At this stage of the game, support your candidate. I encourage you. That's how this is supposed to work. It's too early. It's way too early. 3 months before Iowa and 1 year before the general. It's way too early to discard your candidate because, quote, they can't win. If you're with Kamala Harris, if you're with Andrew Yang, if you're with freaking Marianne Williamson, that's fine. Advocate for your candidate. You still listen, you're still open to change your mind, of course, but don't start playing political games with your vote. Don't let them convince you that you have to jump on board with one of the 2 or 3 top candidates in the polls. It's too early for that. No, stay with your candidate. That's fine. So I'm not telling you Bernie has to be your candidate. I'm just telling you, don't listen to the absolute beatdown he's getting in the media. And worse than a beatdown sometimes is just to be ignored, to be shunned. I've recommended in the past, and I'll say it again, I think that's a technique that should and could be used against Agent Orange. To literally shun him, to literally ignore him, to not acknowledge his presence, acknowledge his existence. That's how you really kill somebody, metaphorically speaking. Because that's what they're doing to Bernie. I say do it to Agent Orange. That pallbearer at the Elijah Cummings funeral, did you see that? When he snubbed Mitch McConnell? Yeah, there's a little reception line, and he's walking down the line, and there's all these dignitaries. Chuck Schumer was standing right next to Mitch McConnell and Pelosi, and I forget who I was on the line, but these dignitaries. And this pallbearer, he's walking down the line shaking everybody's hand. He shakes Schumer's hand, and then he completely ignores Mitch McConnell as though he does not exist, as though he's invisible. Walks right past him and shakes Nancy Pelosi's hand. And the look on McConnell's face was priceless. And the look on Schumer's face, who saw the whole thing go down, and he's looking down at McConnell. Oh, it's a moment. And that guy's a hero. We should all be that pallbearer. We should shun and ignore certain people. But yeah, that's what's happening to Bernie. He's being shunned and ignored by very, very powerful people. So there you go. And I'll remind you again, when it comes to voting for president, you got to remember that you're electing an entire branch of government. The presidency has great power, too much power. We're supposed to have this check and balance thing going, but that's not the way it's working right now. The executive branch right now is the most powerful. A president can do so much by way of executive order, nominates the judges, the federal judiciary, as commander-in-chief, issues of war and peace, foreign policy, and the president can get Congress by the short hairs and completely dominate policy because individual members, for fear of losing their seat, have to go along. So when you're deciding on your vote, sure, listen to the candidate, listen to their ideas, of course, but any candidate can say nice things and they can look good saying it. You got to look at 2 things. 1, where are they getting their money? Are they getting it from big corporate donors, or are they getting it from small individuals? You don't think that makes a difference? Come on. And number 2, and a lot of people don't think about this, I want you to look at your candidate's inner circle. Look at who's advising them, because that's going to give you a very accurate picture of their administration if they're elected. Do you want a lot of retreads from old administrations? Do you want corporate CEOs and lobbyists filling all of the many roles in the cabinet, top advisors? Take a look at your candidate's inner circle, because that will be the executive branch. Okay. So bottom line here, either through impeachment or through election, Agent Orange has to go, just absolutely has to go for the sake of this world. I mean, the stakes are high. This is not your every 4-year hyperbole. No. The stakes are literally high right now. And before we leave the realm of electoral politics here, we have to decide, each of us, each one of us has to decide how to deal with the people who've just gone so far astray. Like I said, the pallbearer shunning technique is really pretty good. But that's for people in power. We've got friends and family we have to deal with, right? Well, let's go with the short, medium, and long-term ideas. In the short term, yes, they have to be defeated. The ideas have to be defeated. I judge ideas, I don't judge people. Love the sinner, hate the sin, to borrow that kind of religious idea. There's no convincing them. You can't argue your point. You can't win them over politically. It's not going to happen in the short term. We just have to continue to love them in any way we can, if they're friends and family, and then work like hell to defeat their ideas, to get enough like-minded people with us to just simply defeat them and silence them. That's all we can't convince that side. And then in the medium term, if and when we win, then, well, we have to include them and try to make them understand that all the benefits that society gets from a clean and productive government in everyday issues that people care about, housing, jobs, education, if they're included in all of that, well, then now their personal experience is going to show them, because that's all they learn from is their own personal experience. Oh, okay, things are going pretty good. All right, that'll win people over little by little by little. And along with that, whatever we can do to make this world more diverse, because that's a huge problem right now from the so-called deplorables. They're living in their white cul-de-sacs, and their bigotry is off the charts. People of color, LGBTQ, we know through history, we've seen it over and over again. It's virtually impossible for a person to live in a diverse community, to have a rainbow of people in their immediate circle, family, friends, workplace, and remain bigoted. It just doesn't happen. It's a beautiful thing about us humans. When we are exposed day in and day out, and by we right now I'm talking about white people. I'm a white guy, right? I'm a straight white guy. I'm talking about straight white people right now. When you're living in the rainbow, when it's in your family, when it's in your circle of friends, when it's at your workplace, when it's everywhere, every time you turn around, you're in it. You become part of it. You can't hate it anymore. Hate disappears. So our medium-term goals and solutions, again, include them in the meat and potato issues: income inequality, housing, jobs, education, and diversity. And then they'll come right with us. We can win them over. And then long-term, of course, that's my utopia. There's really no such thing as money. That's not guiding anybody anymore. That's not pushing anybody left or right. And a good world just means less bad people because of the inclusion and because money is no longer an incentive. So that's the long-term goal. Still, we got to keep our eyes on it. Yes, short-term goals have to happen right now, today. There's no talking about them anymore. That has to happen right now, as we speak, with the medium term in mind, and ultimately keep your eye on the prize. No more money incentive. A good world means less bad people in it. You've heard the expression, no justice, no peace. I agree. No justice, no peace. You can't have peace without justice. And you can't have justice while money is still running things. So, with money still at the heart of everything, you'll never have justice. And with no justice, you won't have peace. So there you go. We got work to do. We got work to do. It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. We're doing a little reset today. We're resetting the show. What this show is about. Taking a look at the top couple of issues, what we care about, and what we can do about it. Let's go to the climate emergency for a little bit. There are a couple things I want to point you to. There was a post going around social media, and it still is. And you may have seen it. It's by a guy named Gus Speth, who I haven't heard of. He's a scientist. And I'll just read it to you. It's short. "We scientists don't know how to do that," is the little headline. And here's his quote. "I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. Okay, I guess there's something to be said for that. Here's where I take issue, Gus. You're not just a scientist. You are a citizen. You and me and the listener and everyone else. You say we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. Well, maybe that's true. But I would expand that a little bit and maybe even disagree with you. We need a political revolution is what we need. You, Mr. Speth, know better than anyone that the climate emergency is here now. You can't just shrug your shoulders, hold up your hands and say, gee, we need spiritual and cultural transformation, and I don't know how to do that, so, well, I don't know. Okay, well, I mean, how is that helpful? We need action now. We need a political revolution, and with that, an economic revolution. The catastrophe of the climate emergency is so imminent that we can't rely on or even hope for cultural transformation. That doesn't happen overnight. As distasteful as it is for many, and as fatiguing as it is for many, there's no getting around it. The nuts and bolts issues of politics and economics have to be upended if we have any hope to thwart the climate emergency. So if you've come across this little meme, I hope you won't just nod your head and say, oh yes, Gus Speth, you're right. And then you shrug your shoulders and you throw up your hands and say, well, we just need to transform. And of course, in your mind, all of us think we've just got the right idea. Well, there's nothing I can do then. I just have to somehow live right in the world and hope that everyone else finds the same calling. No. There's a surrender in this thought that we just can't afford. So, Gus Speth, yes, you're a scientist. Yes, you seem to have the right ideas about things. Good for you. But you're also a citizen, like all of us are. And we have to do the work of citizenry right now, today. So I have very mixed feelings about this little meme. We scientists don't know how to do that. Well, you're not just scientists. You're citizens. We all are. And we have to face up to that responsibility and act on it. On the issue of the climate crisis, climate emergency, well, emergency is the word now being used by many of us, emergency and crisis. The word emergency is now being used in a statement signed by 11,000 scientists. Several articles you can find on this. Let me see what I've got here. This is from CBC, Canadian Broadcasting, I guess it is. 11,000 scientists signed Declaration of Climate Emergency. In a declaration published Tuesday in the journal Bioscience, the collective put forth 6 critical and interrelated steps that governments and policymakers should take into account in order to reduce the effects of climate change. There is a longer online supplement people can read should they want to further explore each topic. All right, I've just clicked on to that longer online supplement. I will link that to the Facebook page, as I always do. Let's take a look. There's another link here in the article I'm reading. The paper itself. Let's read a little bit from that. We declare, with more than 11,000 scientist signatories from around the world, clearly and unequivocally that planet Earth is facing a climate emergency. Greenhouse gas emissions are still rapidly rising, with increasingly damaging effects on the Earth's climate. An immense increase of scale in endeavors to conserve our biosphere is needed to avoid untold suffering due to the climate crisis. And they talk about energy, short-lived pollutants, nature itself, food, the way we produce and consume food, the economy, population, and then conclusions. Let's read the conclusions. Mitigating and adapting to climate change while honoring the diversity of humans entails major transformations in the ways our global society functions and interacts with natural ecosystems. As the Alliance of World Scientists, we stand ready to assist decision makers in a just transition to a sustainable and equitable future. We urge widespread use of vital signs which will better allow policymakers, the private sector, and the public to understand the magnitude of this crisis, track progress, and realign priorities for alleviating climate change. The good news is that such transformative change with social and economic justice for all promises far greater human well-being than does business as usual. We believe that the prospects will be greatest if decision makers and all of humanity promptly respond to this warning and declaration of a climate emergency and act to sustain life on planet Earth, our only home. So there it is, another warning. And I encourage you to, again, I'll link that to the Facebook page. And in the meantime, there are plenty. You can just Google 11,000 scientists. Bang, bang, bang. It'll come right up. So I don't know what else needs to be said about this. We talk about climate change almost on a weekly basis here, and it's going to continue. We'll continue to hammer the main points. We'll also try to find updates and new ideas. But here we go again. This is significant. This latest warning. If we put this in the context of our short, medium, and long-term actions, for the short term, I'm going to encourage you to go back to our quiz show. Let me go ahead. Let me see if I can find that. Give me a second here. I'm just going to get you the date of that show. We did, Chuck and Chucky and I did a show several weeks ago, and we had a very nice source. It was an online quiz to see how much you knew about climate change solutions. It was really good. And I'm just going to find it for you here. I'm going to get you the date. Okay, here it is. I found it. Dated July 13th. It's the July 13th show, episode 23. So jot that down, would you? And go to charlespurcell.com, scroll down to episode 23, which I'm doing right now, and give that a listen. I forget the source. I would give them credit if I had it in front of me. But someone put out a great little online quiz to find out how much you know. And it's just filled with really, really good ideas on what both you can do as an individual and what governments and businesses can do right now. The very best steps to take right now today. So I encourage you to do that. Again, episode 23 of the log, dated 7/13, and you can only find that on the website, charlespurcell.com, because that was while we were still using the old distribution. Current shows from Labor Day on, you can find anywhere you find your podcasts. But prior to Labor Day of this year, we were using another site. So you have to go to the website to find that one. But I encourage you to do it. I hope you will. I really hope you will. Because we need action right now. So those are things you can do. We can also, you know the line. You can say it before you say it, right? You can anticipate what I'm going to say. You can hit the streets. You can join in the protests. You can call your representative. These are all things we can do right now, today. In the medium term, you can make the bigger changes that maybe take a little while. You can look at the kind of house you live in. You can look at the kind of job you're working in. You can look at your commute, your own personal lifestyle. How can I change these things so I'm part of the solution, not part of the problem? And I encourage you to do that. Short, medium, and long term, they have to be happening in concert with each other. And then in the medium term as well, you can take it a step further. You can really organize, run for office, however you feel best serves. Because all of us are responsible. All of us and each of us. This is not somebody else's problem. And then, of course, long term, and my long term is always the same. Money is no longer an incentive. In the long term, we want to shoot for a world where all incentives lead to good results. Right now, we are incentivized by money and profit, and it leads to bad results. Take away money and profit, take away the incentive. Now incentives instead are health and well-being for ourselves, for our families, for the community, for the world. When we are incentivized, and government uses this all the time, but again, in the realm of money, they want to incentivize by giving tax breaks. Well, it's good if people don't smoke, so let's put high taxes on cigarettes. Well, it's good if you have solar panels on your house, so we'll give a tax break if you install solar panels. And it's also convoluted. It's also Rube Goldberg. In a world of money and profit, the incentives are always going to lead to bad results. Again, we're resetting the show today. Climate change, which I'm going to leave it here for now and let you do your own homework. I really want you to go to the episode on what you can do right now and to this 11,000 scientists signature message on climate emergency. It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. My final reset of the day. Now, please don't roll your eyes. I know we've got some regular listeners who are pretty tired of hearing this. But the other issue that is central to this program as we reset today is wealth inequality. The power of money, the power of profit, the power of corporations, which leads to basically every problem we have. For the sake of not repeating myself ad nauseum here, again, you've heard this all before, let me take some recent examples and anecdotes. We'll do it that way. There's a move about I keep seeing these articles pop up. Tiny houses to be built for veterans, that's one I saw. And I've seen a couple different stories about cities building these little kind of huts, sometimes literally boxes for homeless people that can save their lives, literally. So it's good. Don't get me wrong. It's great. They look like a tiny Quonset hut, but they're really just big enough for one person to crawl in. They're tiny, and they're constructed in such a way that body heat is all that's needed to warm it. It's this technological kind of marvelous thing, designed for homeless people to crawl in there so they don't die in the cold. All right, this is good. Here's my problem. We're literally putting people in boxes now. Here's a box. Wealth inequality, the power of money, the power of corporations have created a world where we have homeless people who hope they're lucky enough to live in a city that's made little heated boxes for them to crawl into. Can we do better than this, please? And tiny houses for veterans? For homeless veterans? You don't think a veteran deserves a little more than a tiny house? Don't give me this tiny house thing. Nobody wants to live in a tiny house. Try it for a week. It'll make you crazy. We have to live in a world where housing is a right. It's a human right. Well, let me rephrase that. We do live in a world because we live in the world. And housing is a human right. What we have to do is recognize it. What we have to do is create a governmental and an economic system that facilitates that. Another story that's been in the news lately, the California fires. I lived out there for many years. I'm sure you know, I've mentioned many times. I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. California, man. I got this love-hate relationship. I love the people. I love California. But man, here we go. Again, with money and profit incentive, and with people seeking comfort and entertainment, and with San Francisco being one of the greatest cities in the world, of course people want to be there. And then the tech boom and all of that brought a whole new dimension to it. But California just isn't suited geographically, topographically, environmentally. It's not suited to have these billions of people. Come on! So if it's not an earthquake, which, by the way, I was there for the 1989 earthquake. I rode that one out. We just had the 30th anniversary of that. Of course, it's a natural disaster. Of course you feel nothing but love and sympathy and empathy and charity toward the people who suffer from it. Something like that. It was great damage, death, and destruction. It was horrible. So there's no questioning our response. At the same time, you cannot ignore the human factor. How this is not only a natural disaster, that 89 quake, and any other disasters you can name since then. Much of the damage in 1989 was down at the marina that never should have been there. It never should have been there. That's the human factor. It was built on sand, built on landfill. They literally dropped sand and created landfill out into the bay so they could make more money, so they could extract more profit. It was literally land that God never put there. Humans put it there, and it was the first to go. It was the weakest spot. And there was huge damage in the Marina District. And people died, and people suffered, and there were fires, and it was horrible, and it never should have been there in the first place. But the money incentive, the profit incentive created this danger zone. And now the same thing is happening with the fires. Fires are part of nature. Fires are going to happen in California. If you live out there and you drive the freeways and you see the rolling hills north of San Francisco, at a certain point of the year, they all turn golden. That's how they got the name. That's how they got the name, the Golden State. It's beautiful, but it's dry, man. It's just the weather. It's just nature. It just is what it is. But the human factor comes in again. They built out and out and out into these areas, housing that never should have been built out there. So no, I'm not going to, in the midst of a fire when your house is burning down, I'm not going to look at you and wag my finger and say, well, you shouldn't have been there. No, I have nothing but sympathy for the individual people. It's a system-wide, profit-incentivized system that put those houses there. Again, I don't judge people. For whatever reason, you decided it was a good idea to move out there. You didn't know, you didn't care, whatever. I don't know, I'm not judging you. But we've got to face facts. Much of the death and destruction needs to lay at the feet of human decisions. Large decisions, corporations, developers, the money guys. And then you factor in climate change, and of the 20 most devastating fires in California's history, 10 of them have happened in the last couple of years. So the way we make money, the way we spend money, the way we develop the infrastructure, all incentivized by money and profit, literally causing death and destruction. And then, of course, after fire season, what have you got? You got mudslide season now, because fires have destroyed all the vegetation, and the soil is just left to the now destructive forces of strong rains. And now we got mudslides. And Highway 17 from the Bay Area down to Santa Cruz is covered in mud and is buckling and failing. And California is this permanent disaster area. Oh, and we all with tears in our eyes, oh, we'll rebuild, we'll survive, we'll be strong. I was very unpopular in 1989 because I was bringing up these issues when everyone else just was just echoing this chorus of, oh, we'll rebuild. What a terrible thing that happened. But we'll be strong, we'll rebuild. No, don't rebuild. Move. Wealth inequality, corporations, profit incentive. That's what this show is about. It's going to tie into almost every issue we talk about. Have you seen the latest? This is another one that's gone around quite a bit. All the research is showing that the more money you have, the worse you get as a human being. You get mean, you get stupid, you get selfish. Rich people are the worst. The more money you have, the worse you are. Your brain deteriorates. That's what they're telling us. That's what all the research is telling us lately. Oh, that reminds me. Here, let me find this one too. This is a good one. Here, hang on. Billionaires. First of all, there should be no such thing as a billionaire. Let's see. Let me find it. Okay, here it is. In 1987, there were 140 billionaires worth more than $300 billion. Today, there are 2,153 billionaires worth $8.7 trillion. From 87 to today, from 140 to over 2,000, and from a net worth of $300 billion to $8.7 trillion. So, in a perfect world, there's no such thing as a billionaire. Nobody needs that kind of money. In the meantime, tax the hell out of them, please. You keep asking how Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are going to pay for their programs. We got all the money in the world. We got all the money we need. Well, correction, they have all the money we need. We just tax them. We just tax them right out, tax billionaires right out of existence. Here's another little nugget for you. 70% of millennials support socialism over capitalism. There's hope. There's hope. They're also the largest voting bloc right now. They are equal to, or maybe just have bumped the boomers for that number one spot. Millennials, vote please. Thank you. Economic and social justice. Even things like hate crimes and bigotry against people of color and LGBTQ. Even those issues are linked. We were talking about the deplorables earlier. If they're not feeling threatened every single day when they get up by their economic life, now a lot of them are just, they're bigots for their own reasons. But a lot of them are just this kind of white trash who struggle for their own identity because, of course, having a job is still your identity. That idea has to go away. You feel like you're not getting ahead. You got people like Agent Orange and others who are very happy to point out scapegoats, and you're uneducated enough to buy it. You remember Trump's quote, right? I love the uneducated. Low information voters. All of this contributes to the kind of bigotry and hate crimes we see. Economic and social justice will go a long, long way. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but it'll go a long, long way to alleviate the problems of hate and bigotry. When it comes to hate crimes, yeah, we got to stop them. We have to arrest them. We have to defeat these people at the polls, at the voting booth. But love the sinner, hate the sin. We got to love them. We got to understand one of my bottom line tenets. Everybody's doing their best. It's just that some people are horrible and doing horrible things because that's just what they know. That's what's in their heart. God bless them. We change the world around them. They'll learn. They'll get it. As I said, if we include them in our solutions, where housing is a right, basic income is a right, education is a right, everyone lives in diverse communities, they'll get it. And their numbers will shrink. A good world means less bad people. You don't create good people in order to have a good world. You create a good world, and good people will emerge. The horse and cart thing, do we make good people? Do we try to convince people to be good in order that we have a good world? No, to our best ability, we create the world with proper incentives and proper human rights, and there will be fewer bad people and more good people. All right, kids, bottom line here. This has been our reset program. Kind of resetting the show, letting you know what we're about. Climate emergency is always going to be right there. While he's in office, Agent Orange and getting rid of him is always going to be central to this program. And at the heart of it all, wealth inequality, the power of corporations, the power of the profit and money incentive, gotta go. We've talked about short, medium, and long-term actions. Well, in the short term, this either by election or impeachment, Agent Orange has to go. That's short term. That's right now. That's happening right now. Climate emergency. climate crisis is happening right now. These are not medium or long-term actions. These are short-term, immediate actions. And in the medium term, going back to the election for a second, if Bernie Sanders is elected president, on the day after the election, I immediately become the loyal opposition from the left. So-called leaders need to be pushed. So I'm never going to be satisfied. I'm never going to have a hero in the White House who I expect will save us all. That's not how the world works. And the medium-range action on climate change, that's where you alter your lifestyle. You maybe change that job, to use the Buddhist concept of a right livelihood. You make sure that your life, your work, serves the solution to climate crisis and does not serve the continuation, the rapid, dangerous spiral down into the destruction of climate change. And then again, to take it a step further, you work, you organize, you run for office. And then long-term, on all of these issues, we have to be either full-blown socialists, which I'd be fine with, or ultimately, even beyond that, you know my bottom line. Repeat it with me. Money gotta go, money gotta go, money gotta go. Housing, food, safety, healthcare, education, the arts, all are human rights. Money and profit incentive should have nothing to do with any of them. And I know you're doing your best. But are you, though? See, sometimes I have to wonder. See, because the more information you have, the more responsibility you have. Otherwise, you're engaging in the greatest sin of all, willful ignorance. You turn your back. You can't take it anymore. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. I don't want to know. Don't tell me, because if I don't know, then I'm not responsible. But if you do know, if something slips through, and then you begin to realize that your own choices in life are on the wrong side of history. As Bob Dylan wisely said, you got to serve somebody. Who are you serving? You got to serve somebody. Might be the devil, might be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. Are you serving the status quo? Are you serving the profit system, either as a buyer or a seller? Are you able to rationalize away your input? Are you so steeped in your cognitive dissonance that you can see a world of injustice and deny your part in it? What are you willing to do? This episode of The Log is available right now wherever you find your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, iHeart, YouTube, and the podcast source. Enter Charles Bursell Presents in the search window. Or best yet, go to charlesbursell.com. There you'll find this and all the other series in the podcast family. Follow, comment, and contact me on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, Riverwest Radio, riverwestradio.com. Theme music composed and performed by Peter Donalds. From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Bursell.